President Trump has certainly reveled in the GOP's continued support for him this week on several fronts. They mostly backed a $1.4 trillion spending deal, which easily passed both chambers, and his revised North American trade agreement in a House vote. And, of course, they held on impeachment, which he noted at a rally in Michigan.
We got every single Republican voted for us. So we had 198, 229, 198. We didn't lose one Republican vote. The Republican Party has never been so affronted, but they've never been so united as they are right now, ever.
As the president wielded his power, Speaker Pelosi was able to hold her conference together. Even moderate Democrats in battleground states, such as Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan.
The president did something different than what President Nixon did and President Clinton did and President Johnson many years ago did. And he gave the word to his administration to not produce any documents, to not respond to any subpoenas, and to not appear.
What kept people, House members like Alyssa Slotkin, with Speaker Pelosi on this critical vote?
Well, I think the impeachment process has kind of completed the process of tribalization of politics in the U.S., where everybody in each party puts on the home jersey, the blue jersey or the red jersey, and goes out on the field and plays for the team, regardless of the circumstances and regardless of what their misgivings might be. And this is true in both parties. It's interesting to remember that when President Trump began his presidential campaign in 2015, he almost ran as an independent. He had disdain for the Republican Party, no regard for the Republican establishment, was hated by the Republican establishment. And now here we are, 3.5 years later, that entire party is behind him. That's what happens in American politics right now. You get behind your team and you stay there, or you get punished from within your own party. That's true in the Democratic Party, and it's true in the Republican Party, and I think that's the process we're seeing play out right now.
And talking about the GOP, what explains them going along with a protectionist, tilting trade deal, the new USMCA, the new version of NAFTA, going along with the $1 trillion spending deal, and sticking with the president on impeachment?
Just as Jerry said, this is a tribal moment in politics, and all of those Republicans in the House know that if they turn on Trump, especially on impeachment, they're going to get a primary challenger the next day. They're going to have a hard time raising money. They're going to have the president tweeting attacks at them. They could potentially have the president going after them in rallies in their home districts. They live in fear of the president turning his political machine against them because he has done that before. It's the reason, one of the reasons why Bob Corker resigned from the Senate 2 years ago. One of the reasons why Jeff Flake didn't run for re-election in Arizona last year. President Trump has such extraordinary control over the Republican Party.
And let's not forget that some of those moderate senators who might be swing votes, there's still time for them to be challenged in a primary in the Republican Party in their home states before this vote happens. They know that.
They're all still pretty quiet at the Capitol. They keep saying they're going to be jurors. But talk about President Trump this week. He wrote that letter to Speaker Pelosi.
Yeah.
You called it, Phil, a window into his soul. I saw it as a political rally on paper. And you also had this rally in Michigan as he's being impeached in the House. What was this week politically and personally for President Trump?
Well, this week for President Trump was probably in many ways kind of his nightmare for the presidency. He didn't want to be impeached, right? Like this is someone
against his brand.
It's against his brand. You know, you can't really sell impeachment, although they're trying a bit. But yeah, like this was something that he wants to be an exceptional president. He wants to be the best president there has ever been, and now, this week, he is an impeached president. And so I think that what you saw was him reacting to that and lashing out about that, really. I mean, he had that 2-hour rally in Michigan. That was one of his longest rallies.
Was it also a snapshot of what we're going to see in 2020, grievance politics?
Oh, well, I think that was going to happen without a doubt, but I think you're going to see it probably on steroids. And he was already very worked up. Even before impeachment came down the pike, you saw him like tweeting more and just getting more vicious, the way he was tweeting about the squad over the summer or the way he tweeted about Elijah Cummings. This was something that he had been going in a more personal direction, in a more grievance direction, like for a very long time.
But Speaker Pelosi doesn't appear to be running on impeachment as her 2020 message for Democrats. She's working with President Trump on the USMCA and the spending deal and prescription drug prices. What does that tell you about the Democratic approach to next year's campaign season?
She is obsessed with sending the message that Democrats are about governing. And remember, she resisted impeachment for a very long time. The better part of a year, she held out against a lot of members of her caucus who felt that the president deserved to be impeached, that it was a constitutional imperative for the Democratic Party. And she held them off and held them off and held them off until the Ukraine situation was so compelling that it moved the caucus almost unanimously, and she went along with it. But she really, her belief is that Democrats won the House because they ran on issues and they ignored Trump. And so even though I think you would have to say that the backlash to Trump and the counter-mobilization against Trump was a huge part of the political dynamic in 2018, you had all of the Democratic candidates were on the same playbook. They were talking about health care. They were talking about jobs and wages. And so obviously, it will be a different story in 2020 when Trump is on the ballot and there is a Democratic candidate leading the message. But she believes very strongly that those issues are still going to be what drives the electorate in 2020. And the polling data that she and the other Democrats in the House are looking at is backing this up, is saying that this is pretty much a wash, the impeachment thing. It has pretty much leveled out in terms of public opinion at about where Trump's approval rating is. And by the time the election rolls around, this won't be what we're talking about.
Jerry, you wrote recently about Prime Minister Johnson in England. Are we seeing a new model for right-wing politics, populism and bigger government spending? The Republicans, populists, supporting the $1 trillion spending deal. You saw Boris Johnson support the NHS and other spending over in the UK.
Yeah, no, populism and nationalism have won the day, and that's really what conservative politics has become. And in that version of conservative politics, you simply don't worry about fiscal austerity. That's not the formula. The formula is don't worry about the deficit. Your base is more working class. They depend on government programs, so fund those programs. Boris Johnson is promising to do that in Britain right now. Donald Trump promised that from 2015 on. I'm not going to cut Social Security. I'm not going to cut Medicare. He never talks about the budget deficit, which is $1 trillion a year now, because that's not what populist politics is about.
And Phil, the president, when he looks at his own party, he sees his own power and popularity with the GOP's core voters, but he's giving them what they want on judges. You see some grumbling on the right. The op-ed today in Christianity Today, an influential evangelical magazine founded by the late Billy Graham, saying President Trump's out of line and should be removed from office. But you see generally on the spending bill, judges, and a range of other issues, they're getting what they want, even if they don't totally approve of his conduct.
Exactly, and it's one of the reasons that the president has been so deliberate, and the vice president too, Pence, about checking these boxes with the base, about pushing the judges and making that a priority for 3 years now, and all sorts of other issues because they're trying to hold them tight heading into the next campaign.